There is a feeling among some people that you have to have a formal mentoring relationship or else you can't have a mentor. I absolutely reject that. I think you can have mentors that might never even meet you. Think about the ways that you can learn all day long. Podcasts, YouTube clips, do-it-yourself videos. There's just so much media. Now it's just a great time to be a curious human.
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for this episode of Leadership. This time we're going to talk about influence, the positive influence that smart and generous people can have on others. I suspect that most of us can identify people who, perhaps without even knowing it, have had a positive and lasting impact on our lives. Maybe it was that 9th grade English teacher who taught us to diagram sentences and appreciate the rules of good grammar. Maybe it was that uncle or aunt or grandparent who taught us the satisfaction and joy that can be found in hard work. As we got older, maybe it was one or two or three of those professional colleagues who showed us the ropes, who helped us expand our own vision of the art of the possible. As that great philosopher Oprah Winfrey said, a mentor is someone who allows you to see the hope that's inside you. Dana Perino has certainly been blessed to have many people such as this in her life. She grew up in Wyoming and Colorado, and then in a series of events that were nothing short of serendipity, if not destiny, she wound up in Washington, D.C. As she has said, she was basically a cowgirl who went east. Dana's professional ascent was beyond what she had imagined. She became White House press secretary and served more than 7 years in the administration of President George W. Bush. Since 2009, Dana has been with the Fox News Channel. She's co-host of The Five, the most watched show in all of cable news, as well as co-anchor of America's Newsroom with her colleague Bill Hemmer. Dana has a new book out. I can tell you it's an insightful and delightful read. It's titled, I Wish Someone Had Told Me, the best advice for building a great career and a meaningful life. Dana Perino, welcome to Leadership.
What an honor to be here, and thank you for that introduction. You nailed it.
That's good. Now, when you were in the 3rd grade, your father had you read the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post every day so you could choose 2 articles to discuss before dinner. What impact did that practice have on you?
I think it was probably one of the most important parts of my childhood that set me up for future success. I'll give you a couple of examples. One of the reasons my dad started that was because he was a voracious news consumer. And as a family, we subscribed to every magazine, every newspaper. We got it all. I was firstborn daughter, and, fathers and daughters.
I do.
Looking for a connection. And my dad knew that I loved to read, and he wanted me to share, his love of current events and debating and talking about issues. So in order to have something to look forward to every day as a little homework assignment, because we got the papers in the morning, I would go through and I could choose any articles that I wanted. It could be about butterflies, whatever. But I had to tell my dad why I liked the article, what I learned from the article, and something maybe that either challenged me or a question I had about the article, or just something a little bit more. So there was a 3-step process. And through my elementary school, junior high, high school years, this continued, but in a way where, I might take the U.S. News and World Report and read an article and dog-ear that. And then on Sundays, my sister and I used to get in an argument because, Saturdays, we had to decide which church service we were going to go to, 8:30 or the 11 o'clock. I
Right.
like to go to the 8:30 because if we went to the 8:30 and Sunday school, I got home in time to watch the Sunday shows. My sister doesn't care about the Sunday shows. So I ended up on the speech team in high school and college. I got a full ride scholarship to go to the University of Southern Colorado on the speech team. And then fast forward, I remember being on Marine One. I was a deputy press secretary, and I was surrounded by people in the West Wing who had all gone to Ivy League schools. And that wasn't me at all, right? And President Bush asked me my opinion about something. And I knew that my opinion was different than Karl Rove's, and he was there with me. Karl was very good to me, always has been. But it's intimidating. And I gave my opinion, and the president sat with it for a while, and I'll never forget. We were about to land, and he looked at the guys and he goes, "She's exactly right." And I had this flash in my mind to that kitchen table on Elm Street in Denver, Colorado, where my dad and I would talk about the news. And I think about how important it is for young girls in particular to be able to articulate themselves in a confident way in front of a more powerful male figure that they'll encounter in their life in the future. Just so happened for me, it happened to meet the President of the United States and Karl Rove.
Right. Well,
But what I think is pretty funny is when I got that job the first time, I'll never forget my mom called me to see how my first week at the White House went. And I said, "Oh, Mom, it's pretty good." And I got to do this press release and I had to send it through the staffing thing. And Karl Rove called me even. And my mom said, "Who the hell is Karl Rove?"
yeah.
And it was good to be reminded and continue to be grounded that you don't want to get all East Coast on people who are from Wyoming.
Right. Now, your colleague, Trey Gowdy, encourages people to, in his words, let fear ride in the passenger seat. What tips can you offer people who really want to stretch their wings but don't yet have the confidence to fly?
Trey Gowdy's contributions to my new book are so valuable. He wrote a terrific book called Start, Stay, or Leave.
I interviewed him about that.
I think it's the best book about decision making that I have ever read. And to know Trey Gowdy is to be a blessed person, but it's also to understand that this guy who is so uber confident and competent actually has his whole life dealt with fear. All of us do, right? I mean, we all have it in some way. And he said that after a while of dealing with all of these fears, he said, it's always going to be with you. You can't pretend that it's not going to be there, but you can let it ride in the passenger seat. It doesn't have to drive. And I thought that was so wonderful to hear. And I wanted to include that along with other types of advice from colleagues like Harold Ford Jr., who I've met and come to know and learned from, because this particular book is not just for young women. My previous one was all my mentoring and advice for young women in particular. This is much more broad-based and a wider age range as well. Yes, that one.
Tell us about your experiences with mentors. When did you first discover the value of mentors? Now, your father was clearly one, but professionally, when did you first have that experience?
My best mentor, I would say that my high school and college speech coaches were very good mentors, very good. Terry Rich and Shauna Whitney. But my best professional mentor was the first chief of staff I ever worked under on Capitol Hill, Holly Probst. Incredible, such a good writer. Really taught me about managing up, which I write about in the book as an undervalued skill.
Right.
Like, I'm really good in a crisis. I'm really good at handling things for the president, the CEO, the top leadership. You need me to go handle something for Condoleezza Rice? I got it. So I think that's an undervalued skill, and you can develop, or you might even have the instincts, but you could develop more skills in order to be able to handle that. And to me, when people have that, they're more likely to get the promotion or the raise or the opportunity to advance in their corporation or organization, or even if they decide to start their own business. So I would say that is one thing that is an undervalued skill that I really learned about.
Now, at Fox News, you have the advantage of daily immersion in a pool of very smart people who are also your friends who cheer you on. Mm-hmm. How can someone without that built-in network of resources identify people who might serve in a mentoring role for them?
This is a great question. And I get it a lot, especially because when I wrote my very first book, and the good news is, I wanted people who grew up in circumstances like myself to know that you don't have to live on the East Coast or the West Coast or go to an Ivy League school to have these experiences. However, there is a feeling among some people that you have to have a formal mentoring relationship or else you can't have a mentor. I absolutely reject that. I think you can have mentors that might never even meet you. Okay? And now you think about the ways that you can learn all day long on podcasts, YouTube clips, do-it-yourself videos. There's just so much media. Imagine when you and I needed to look something up, we went to the bookshelf and got the encyclopedia.
Right.
Now, those were simpler times, but now it's just a great time to be a curious human. And one thing that people are really needing to work on is writing skills. So I think there's nothing wrong with finding somebody that you think is a really good writer and reading all of their work, maybe even trying to imitate, not copy, but imitate the style, if that's the kind of style and the voice that you're looking for. And then you might not ever meet that person, but you might be surprised. If you reach out and ask for mentoring from somebody and you nail the request and the pitch, it just might work. I'll give you a short story about that if it's okay.
Please.
A few weeks ago, Fox News had like a speed dating mentoring event. It wasn't dating, it was mentoring.
Right.
This is something I had the idea to do after I left the White House because it would be more efficient. To me, young people all have the same questions. No one has all the answers. And so if you can get groups of young women together, they can share the answers amongst themselves. And it's just a great event.
Right.
And this young woman comes, she's the fourth group to sit down, and she's there. And I ask everybody their name, and she says, "I'm Jacqueline." And I make eye contact with her. I'm like, "Oh, you're the girl." And what had happened the year before, she was graduating from college, local school here in New York, really wanted to work at Fox News, had not found a way to get her foot in the door. And she was on a walk with her aunt. And the aunt said, "Well, I mean, it's a long shot, but Dana says she really appreciates handwritten notes and letters. And I know where she is. You could write her a letter and include your resume and leave it in her mailbox, and you never know." And I was like, wow, this is this girl. I remember getting home, opening, like, what is this envelope? Opening it, reading a very well-written, beautiful letter, poised, put together, smart. And I thought, well, maybe I can help her. I don't know. Put it in my backpack. Got here on a Monday morning and said, "Oh, hey, Caroline, can I make sure that I want to get this resume to HR? Can you email this young woman and ask her to send it?" And I didn't know she got the job. She wanted to tell me in person. And so you never know if you take a chance on finding a mentor, even if it's a remote possibility, it's worth the risk to try.
You never know.
Yeah.
You absolutely never know. Now, when you were, I believe it was unexpected, when you were unexpectedly promoted to the position of White House press secretary, how did you overcome any possible self-doubt and simply carry on with the job?
One of the things that my girlfriend writes in the book, her name is Maura Nielsen, she said, "Everyone's just faking it." And have you ever heard of imposter syndrome?
Of course.
So everyone has it. And I remember one time being at the podium about to take questions from the press and thinking, why would they ask me? What do I know? Who am I? I don't know. I remember having a dream that the reporters were asking me questions in a foreign language, and I didn't know any of the answers. I mean, dealt with all of that. But here's how I dealt with it. I'm small of stature. and I was younger than almost every reporter in the room at the time.
You have a big spirit, though.
Yeah. But here's the thing. No one's going to outread me on any day of the week to this day. And I pride myself on the preparation. I've tried every shortcut. None of them work. I have to do the reading myself. I have to prepare. And look, when you're covering a Trump administration, it's like you're never bored.
You're
In
right.
2017, I took a nap on a Saturday for 20 minutes. I woke up and 3 stories had broken. So you've got to be on your toes all the time. I don't know if I could actually be prepared as the press secretary. I love getting to know Caroline Leavitt. She's very, very vivacious. As my mom says, she's a real pistol. But I would basically try to be the most prepared person in the room. I would read everything, and I would be in every meeting with the president and was fully present in that job at the time. I did some things that were not smart, and they were mostly to do with my health. And I spend a good amount of time in the new book talking about how the one job that all of us have that we have to do ourselves, that you cannot outsource, is taking care of your health. Nobody else can do it for you. But when I was at the White House, I basically drank caffeine all day, hardly ate anything, didn't breathe. I would exercise a little bit, but not really, if I think back. I got my arm from here to here was numb for 6 months because of the new fangled thing called the BlackBerry. I had a ringing in my ear that lasted over 2.5 years. I had a twitch in this eye, and it was all stress related. And I don't ever wish to go back to the White House, but I know a couple of things. One, I would be a much better press secretary today than I was then, partly because I would take better care of myself. And also because I am humbled enough to know that every morning I wake up, I feel like I know less than the day before. So I'm motivated to try to stay on top of things.
I keep thinking of your dad and that assignment he gave you. That pays off every day of your life.
Yes, and I am really blessed to work at Fox News. I have so many opportunities here. And I love how the company is evolving with all of the changes that are happening in technology, that I could do this interview with you. And I did something with Shannon Bream earlier that will air on Fox News Sunday. And I'm going to have a chance to have an op-ed on foxnews.com. I have a podcast of my own. Fox Nation is going to do a special. I could go and do Fox Business. I have 2 shows a day on Fox News. I mean, there are so many wonderful things that are happening right now. But to your point, even if none of this was happening and I didn't get paid to be informed because of what my dad instilled in me early on, I'd be doing it anyway.
Right. Now, you had the remarkable experience of having a president of the United States serve as one of your unofficial mentors.
Yeah.
From George W. Bush, what did you learn about yourself and about doing hard things?
He is definitely a mentor of mine. George W. Bush loves career counseling. Absolutely loves it. He'll do it with anybody, anytime. And he did a lot of different things in his life. I love his book, Decision Points. And he explains like how he ended up where he is today. And one of the most important decisions he made was on age 40 when he decided to stop drinking.
Right.
And without that decision, none of the other ones would have happened. A couple of things with him. When he announced me as press secretary, he looked out to all of those reporters. There hadn't been a woman press secretary in many, many moons. And I, again, small person, but all the reporters knew me for a long time because I was a deputy for a long time behind the scenes, and I knew all of them pretty well. But he looked at all of them and he said, and I chose her because I know she can handle you all. And that vote of confidence meant the world to me, and it also helped him because then they knew that I was tight with him.
It kind of put the reporters on notice, too.
Yeah, and it gave them confidence.
Sure,
that if I answered a question, that they knew that it was coming from the boss.
Right.
Because the worst thing that you can have, if you don't have that trust with the press, then the reporters try to go around you and annoy everybody at the White House, and things can get out of control. But the other thing that he did is after I left the White House, I sort of floundered. I think people think that, oh, wow, she landed on her feet. It's so perfect. Everything. I mean, it wasn't. I took on every possible job. I was working more hours than even when I was at the White House. But the only thing I really wanted to do was be on Fox. And I was a contributor, but I had all these other opportunities and I was still trying to find myself. And I joined a PR firm, big one. And boy, I did not like it. And 6 months afterwards, I had to go to Dallas. I cannot remember the reason, but it was to do something for the Bushes. Maybe it was to help him with his book. I think maybe that was it. And I walked in and I said, "Good morning, Mr. President." And the first thing he said was, "What's wrong?" I said, "Nothing. No, everything's fine." It's like, I can tell what's going on. What's wrong? So I said, "Well, I joined this PR firm and I don't really love it." And he said, "Well, why don't you just start your own?" I said, I can't because I have and I gave him other reasons. And he said, "Yeah, I'm not persuaded by any of that." He's like, "Ask yourself this. You start your own business and it fails. Is that the worst thing that could happen? You'd have to go work for another PR firm?" And he was big, still is big on being willing to take a risk. And he really instilled in me something that is important that I talk about in I Wish Someone Had Told Me, which is if you are an educated American, you won life's great lottery. So now you have to decide, how are you going to spend your days? What is your intention for your career or for your life? What do you want to accomplish? And all of this opportunity is here for you. You just have to decide how hard you want to work. So I did start my own thing. And ultimately, The Five became a daily show. I moved to New York. I left the PR firm, and I've never been happier.
The rest is history, as they say.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
Now, the Gallup organization reports that employee engagement continues to be on life support in many workplaces. Your colleague Bill Hemmer advises that if you keep your mind engaged, you'll never get bored.
Yeah.
What seems to be the key to finding that kind of job? What would you advise other people?
You know, the thing that's very interesting about that idea that Hemmer talked about is that many others did as well, including most of the men. So in fact, I just pulled this thing here. Bill Hemmer talks about keeping your mind engaged. Trey Gowdy talks about having a significant life and making sure that you are engaged every day when you talk about engagement. Charles Payne said, education is okay, but learning is everything. And then Mike Rowe says that education is not nearly as valuable as a curious mind. And you brought up curiosity earlier. And in my part of the book, I talk about ABL, always be learning.
Right.
And there's only so many hours in the day. We have to prioritize sleep. We know how important that is. So in the hours that we're not sleeping or doing some exercise, or maybe even you can learn while you're exercising.
Well, you can, sure.
You absolutely can. And here's a rule that I have for young people. I suggest no reality television. It is pointless. It might be fun, might be interesting, whatever, but you cannot sit and watch hours and hours of reality television and expect to continue to succeed in the workplace. It's my personal opinion. I could be wrong, but I think that reality television is a time suck that will hurt people. What's interesting is Gen Z, the youngest, they apparently are loving watching and listening to podcasts like this, as if they're hungry for a deeper conversation, something that is not just scrolling through TikTok or Instagram. And the numbers are really increasing. And our podcast efforts here at Fox News are incredibly successful. And what's amazing is how young some of our listeners are, or viewers.
Right. Well, they're learning the importance of learning.
Hope so.
Now, in today's marketplace of ideas, there seem to be an abundance of people who are eager to talk over or even shout down anyone who disagrees with them. In other words, rather than listening to learn, they listen to rebut. From your experience, what does effective listening look like in terms of observable behavior? And what's the key to developing that skill?
I'm still learning it. I think you can tell I have a lot to do in a day, and I'm a quick thinker. And when somebody comes into my office and they want mentoring, I pretty much can guess what they're going to say, and I can jump ahead. And I find that if I do that, if I try to finish their sentence, it really kills their momentum and it makes them want to not listen to me. So I also think about the late Charles Krauthammer, who was an amazing leader, thought leader, philosopher, analyst, writer. And every night when he was on the special report panel with Brett Baer, he couldn't take notes, right? He was a quadriplegic, and he would listen. He was usually the last to go in a round.
Mm-hmm.
And he would be able to pick up on something everyone said and then have his thoughts ordered. So I try to emulate him, but there is one very practical tip I got from Paul Morrow, one of the contributors here and a dear friend of mine. He most recently was an inspector for the NYPD, very high up, a lawyer.
Right.
He said that he found that it's important to have your younger people, or maybe not even so young, but people that work for you, to be comfortable expressing themselves in front of you. And also, he's like, yeah, I've heard this all before, I know. But sometimes someone will say something that will get you a clue to whatever the problem is you're trying to solve. And he said he learned to put his finger over his mouth like this as a signal to himself to keep from interrupting someone.
Right.
And I love that practical advice. And so I put that in the book too, just because there's theory about being curious. That's great. But some practical tips are also really good to have so that you can try it for yourself and see if it works.
Well, that reminds me of something I learned from one of my early mentors, and you probably knew him, Jim Lehrer.
Oh, wow.
PBS. He was my editor in Dallas many, many years ago. I was a young investigative reporter, and he was asking me how I did interviews, and I was talking to him about it. And he said, when you ask a question, count to 5 after they've given their answer before you ask another question. And I said, Jim, that's going to seem like an eternity. He said, what do you think will happen? I said, well, I don't know what happens. He said, they'll start talking again. So he said, you're going to go out and do some interviews today. Try it. So I did. I'd ask a question, count to 5 silently. They expanded on their answer and went off in a different direction. It was a much richer interview. I came back to the newsroom and he waved me over to his desk, and I just shouted to him across the newsroom, and I said, I never got past 3. When they realized I wasn't going to jump in, they enriched the conversation. So you're right.
The other thing is it's important as an interviewer to be listening to the answers, because sometimes there'll be one little nugget that you think, wait, what?
Right.
How frustrating is it when you're listening or watching an interview and you think of the obvious follow-up
and they missed it.
and they don't ask it. That drives me crazy. But I'm sure I do it all the time, but I try not to.
I don't notice you do. Now, in some workplaces, there seems to be a burnout epidemic. What's your advice to people who find it difficult to manage their stress, some of which might even be self-imposed?
I do think, for me, movement is very important. My sister is like, you're always talking about movement.
Physical movement.
Physical movement. Because Condi Rice told me one time that human beings can only get stress out by physically moving. And so I have added more Pilates, more yoga, more stretch to my life, in addition to walking. I love to walk in New York, even though, sometimes it's not so pleasant, but I do like to walk. I have this little band here, that I can do my stretches with, things here in the office, like this little thing to help me with strength in my thumb.
Right.
of all the phone use. So I think that burnout can come in a lot of different ways, and I'm sensitive to it. I don't feel it myself. Sometimes I can feel like I have too much on my plate. Often that is self-imposed. I mentioned all the opportunities that we have here. Sometimes I don't want to turn anything down, so I say yes to everything. I have learned something else, though, about burnout. And one of the things is either movement or prioritizing sleep. Also, I learned from my CEO, Suzanne Scott, after COVID, when we all were right back in it, her rule for herself is that she tries never to do more than one weeknight event per week.
Yes.
And, if you live in New York, there's so many opportunities.
Sure.
You can go to a Broadway play, you want to go to a lecture, how about the Comedy Cellar, how about dinner with these people? Everybody comes to town. And it's hard to tell friends who have traveled here from Colorado and they're here on business only once a year that you can't go out that night. It's really hard. And I'm not saying I do this perfectly, but I find that helps me as well, that you have to figure out a way to maintain your work-life balance. However, if you are burned out because you don't like your job or you don't like your colleagues, then you have to take some of Trey Gowdy's advice and think about whether it's time to leave for another opportunity.
Let's go back to curiosity a minute. In talking about curiosity, your colleague Mike Rowe says a job is a date, a career is a spouse. Both deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, but there's a difference. Can you elaborate on that perspective?
I love that line. He's got such a way with words.
He does.
What a wonderful, talented human. I think that I'm not exactly sure how he thinks about it in his mind, but in mine, I'm using this word intention quite a bit. So I can think of my job as an anchor from 9 to 11 a.m. And then my job from 5 to 6 p.m. is as an analyst on the 5. But the arc of my career is much bigger than that. And it includes mentoring and books, speeches, opportunities that are the umbrella of the jobs that I do. That's how I look at it. And Trey also talks about the difference between significance and success. So you can be super successful financially.
And miserable.
Right, like some of these guys on Wall Street, right?
Right.
But significance matters, and you have to really think about that. There's a chapter in the book about what matters in the end. And my husband and I are very active with this organization called Mercy Ships, and it is a Christian ship that serves the west coast of Africa through surgery. And I've found that he and I have a deeper, meaningful relationship with each other when we are participating with that group. And it could be any group. It doesn't matter. I don't care what it is. But something that is bigger than yourself is what can help define significance versus just having success.
Well, that leads to another question. How can someone know when it's the right time to leave a job? And what's the best way to do it?
I interviewed my friend Michelle Chase about this because she's been in human resources for 25 years or so. She's worked all sorts of different jobs. One, I asked her, I said, is it ever appropriate to leave a job with giving less than 2 weeks notice? And she said, absolutely not. And that 2 weeks is the bare minimum. Sometimes it's a month. And that she really advises people not to burn bridges going forward. She also talks about very practical advice for young mothers who take a few years off of work in order to get the children to a place before they go to school.
Right.
And then when you go back to work, about how to set yourself up so that you aren't penalized financially. A lot of employers will want to say, well, you have been working for 5 years, so let's talk your pay. She said, no. She's got very good practical tips in here for how to avoid that. And she believes that if you feel like there really is nothing you have left to learn, you should leave. Another friend of mine says that you actually need to feel like you are almost going to drown every day. And if you do not feel like that, you should move on. That's not for everybody, but I would say my waterline is right there at my chin.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about one, I've talked about how much I love working here at Fox, and maybe it is just my age, but also the opportunities I have here, is that for the first time in my life, I'm not worried about what's next. And my great hope for people who would read this book is that they can turn off that worry button because it doesn't get us anywhere.
That's true. Now, you write about the importance of identifying and then focusing on what really matters. You've alluded to that. In our pressure-filled world, how can someone take a deep breath and confidently identify the activities and relationships that are truly most valuable to them?
Again, I think you have to make it an intention, and you have to maybe even schedule the time into your day to do it. I am really scared for these younger people who, especially the ones who spent their high school years in COVID, they don't like to leave their apartments. They don't want to go out and meet people. And loneliness is a problem for so many, but a lot of it is self-imposed. And church is a great place to find some friends. I remember when I worked on Capitol Hill, I was kind of lonely. I wasn't dating anybody, but I went to the Lutheran Church of the Reformation. It's like right behind the Supreme Court. And we had a singles group that got together every Wednesday evening. It was so fun. I love those people. I'm still in touch with them. And Thursdays, we mentored some young people that came from another neighborhood, and we got a bus and they would come and we would work with them for a couple of hours in the evenings. And on Sundays after church, sometimes Saturday, we'd go on these huge, very long bike rides. I'm just a big proponent of figuring out a way to get yourself out of the house even when you don't want to. You know, they say the hardest part of a workout is the first step out the door to go to the gym.
Right.
I think that is also true for networking or relationship building. My husband and I are also trying to be much more purposeful about friendships and showing up for our friends. So yeah, I worked all day. I get up at 4:45 in the morning. Do I want to go to that birthday party in Tribeca? No, but I'm going to go. And usually when you get there, you're like, oh, I'm glad I did that.
Glad you were there.
Almost always. Yep.
Right. Dana, what's the best advice you ever received?
I love this question. It's one of the reasons I wrote the book and asked a lot of people this question. I met my husband on an airplane. I was 25. He was 18 years older than me.
Still is.
Yeah, he still is. He's British, but now American. And there's a million reasons why we shouldn't have ended up together. And I was really concerned about what people would think about me because I was going to move to England and live with a much older guy before we got married. We got married within the year of meeting each other. But a girlfriend of mine from Colorado at a family event took me aside during Christmas and she said, so what's going on? What's happening? And I told her my hesitation, and she said, don't give up on this chance to be loved. It might be the only chance you get. And so what I would say to people is that choosing to be loved was not a career limiting decision for me. And that making a commitment to somebody, and for me with Peter, has made all the difference in my career. I really don't think any of this would have been possible without him, and it certainly wouldn't have mattered as much.
One final question. What question do you wish I had asked but didn't, and how would you respond?
I feel like you are a very good interviewer. Jim Lehrer taught you very well.
I love Jim.
I do too. I feel like you've covered all of the bases, and thank you for being so interested in the book. I might add just one other thing. I included my college roommate in this book, and I think about how impressed I am with her. Andrea Aragon. She grew up in Rocky Ford, Colorado. She was the melon queen.
Oh,
in
boy.
Rocky Ford, California. Yeah, Colorado. And she married a great guy named Darren Smith. He was from Wisconsin. They raised 2 children. One is on his way to be a doctor. The other one is going to probably have a gigantic business that we haven't even imagined yet. And this is a person so grounded, so beautiful, so fun. And I love the advice that she provides in the book. I think it's probably the most important one, which is authenticity and being yourself. Because all of us are worried about what other people are going to think about us. It's so weird. Even at 52, you're like, why am I worried about that? Everyone's always just thinking about themselves. And if you can start to remember that in your day-to-day life, you will find more serenity and enjoy this limited time that we have here and make the most of it.
That's great advice for anybody at any age.
True.
Well, thank you so much, Dana. I have a sense of how jam-packed your schedule is, and you've been very generous with both your time and your insights. Remember, folks, Dana's new book is titled, I Wish Someone Had Told Me. And her previous book, which was an instant #1 national bestseller, is titled Everything Will Be Okay. That book is so much fun to read that I smiled just saying the title. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I share my exclusive conversations with top thought leaders who offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. My guests include superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Doug Conant, Heather Younger, Marshall Goldsmith, Amy Edmondson, Bill George, Jessica Chin, Guy Kawasaki, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, folks, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan. Dana, I could have talked for hours with you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
I did too. God bless you.
I feel like you and I should be neighbors.
That's exactly what I was thinking.